Preston Spradlin is the new JMU head coach. Last name a little bit tricky. He says you can just call him Coach P. I don't love Coach P, so I might be going with Spradlin.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
His last name's not difficult.
I feel like it's a little weird.
I mean, maybe Spradlin.
I could
Like
say
if
almost
you're,
being like sprawling, sprad,
yeah,
like
you're.
maybe
But once you get Spradlin down, like once you say it once, then
like
you're
you're
pretty
good.
much, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not totally sold on Coach P yet. I do
Yeah.
like Coach Spradlin. So we'll figure out exactly how that's going to go moving forward. But seems like a really good hire, right? He comes from Morehead State, where he was there, I think 7 years as like the full time, and then an eighth where he was the interim, where he took over during kind of a rocky situation. The coach got fired. I think he had some um, accusations that weren't great in terms of how he was treating players and handling players. So Spradlin takes over when they need stability at Morehead State, brings that. They end up finishing that year decently. They actually lost a lot during his first few years as head coach, right? So you talk about those 7 year stint. First three were kind of meh. The last four, they've been phenomenal. 4 straight 20-win seasons, 2 NCAA tournaments, 1 NIT appearance. They played really, really good basketball. He's only 37 and he's got, 7, 8 years as a head coach, which is crazy to think about. But
He was your age.
yeah,
He was your age when he started as the Morehead State head coach.
nuts. Spent a
Could
few. Sorry,
could
go
you
ahead.
imagine? Could you imagine you Bennett Conlon being a Division I men's basketball coach right now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I could. I would just go out there. We'd just be running full court press. We'd be basically Jim Crutchfield, D2. We're going up and down. Our practices, we don't run. We just do practice. We play basketball.
Just
Sweet, but
scrimmage.
we would not win Division II national championships like Mr. Crutchfield, a reported candidate for the job. But Spradlin, he's so young. He's one that I should have had on our original list. And I had him on my Google Doc list that I trimmed down, and he didn't make my cut for whatever reason, which
Yikes.
I thought he wasn't 37, among other reasons to not include him. But anyway, he's a really good basketball coach. 4 straight 20-plus wins, couple NCAA tournament appearances. That seems like a good coach to bring in.
Yeah, and he adapts his style of play to his roster that he has at a current time. So you go through, he used to play kind of an up tempo type of style in his first few years with Morehead. They're in like the mid to upper 100s in terms of average possession length, according to KenPom. These last few years, they've been low 300s. So he really adjusts things. And if you look at his overall win-loss record, it's not going to blow you away. It's not going to impress you. It's not going to be like, whoa, they got this awesome dude. But you look at the last 4 years, what he has done, 20 plus wins in each one of the seasons, 2 NCAA tournament berths, an NIT run where they took down Clemson a year ago. I mean, this dude can coach. This dude is really good. I was a little hesitant when I first heard his name because I wanted something a little bit splashier. But we'll get into kind of, I have a part on the doc on our outline, kind of life of a mid-major. And I just wanted to talk out my thoughts about what this hiring process was like. But Preston Spradlin, I think a home run type of hire for the Dukes. I want to play this quick, about 90-second clip from his opening press conference, breaking down what he thinks his style of play is and how he adapts to it each season.
The last 3 years, not counting this past season, we had defended a certain way, right? We had switched 1 through 4. Our ball screen defense was top 20 in the nation, and we were hedging, and we had a very elaborate ball screen defense. We were a scramble team and all these different things. And so going into this past season, we were implementing the defense that had obviously been very good to us. And so we put it in all summer, and then we got to where we had a chance to do a close scrimmage against another team, and they beat our brains in. And it was very quickly. It was on a Friday night. I realized, man, we're going to have to change what we're doing with this team. It doesn't matter, what I like or what's been good. We can't just sit back and say, hey, you guys can't do the defense that I know. I got to learn something new. And that was so 10 days after that, we opened at Alabama. And so in that 10-day span, we completely changed our defense, ball screen coverage, our switching, how we got through screens. And so we had to, as a staff, put our heads together, put a plan together of how we were going to break the habits we had built for 3.5 months and then instill some new habits, some very particular ones that were going to help this team in the long run, knowing that it might not help us in the first 2 weeks, but that's, it's a marathon. And so we completely changed all of that. But what doesn't change in terms of our defense, schematically, those things may change. Our standards do not.
We like that.
You ready to run through a brick wall?
I like that he can adapt to different things, right? Where if something's not working, there are some coaches who are incredibly stubborn and they'll keep going with it. Doesn't seem
Tony
like that's
Bennett.
him. Yeah. I also think he's a great communicator, which I think will help him as a coach. The way he describes things they want to do as a team, he's very clear about the values of the program, right? I don't think they're offering crazy NIL deals, and
We'll get into that.
we'll get to that later. But yeah, he seems like a really solid communicator. Seems like somebody who's very grounded. He strikes me as somebody who's kind of wise beyond his years. He doesn't seem like a 37-year-old coach.
No, not at all. It might be because he has 7 years of head coaching experience now. It's not often you get a 37-year-old head coach who started his head coaching career at the ripe old age of 29. Like that is just so young to me. It's something that is honestly unheard of across the Division I landscape. But he may change, he may adapt, he changes things based on how his roster is handling it. The one thing that doesn't change with Preston Spradlin and his Morehead State teams, man, did they defend the heck out of the ball. They have been one of the top defensive teams in the OVC every single year that he's been there. He just preaches a high-end defensive style team. Offense changes a little bit. He was talking too a little bit about how at one point they had a 6'10" type of guy who then transferred to Auburn and became an All-American. And he said every possession we were getting him the ball. After he transferred, their next season, their best player was Mark Freeman, who's in the transfer portal, who was a 5'10", 5'11" guard. And you can only imagine how different an offense might look when you're running things through a 6'10" forward to then a 5'10" guard. So he can keep things very, very loose and can really adjust to his roster. And I'm very excited to see that because he's going to have to completely revamp this Duke's roster.
And it's different. He does it differently than Byington, right? So they play slower offensively, like you had mentioned. Defensively, they're not known for forcing a lot of turnovers, so they defend really well without creating turnovers, which is JMU's thing previously under Byington, was just force a bunch of turnovers and go in transition. So very different style, but one that's proven to be successful. You mentioned some of the numbers aren't crazy. 52-6 at home over the last 4 years, which I thought was impressive. And this year they were 26-4 against non-power conference teams. So they had 5 of their 9 losses were to power conference teams. 4 of those actually Big Ten teams, and then Alabama.
Pretty good stuff. Pretty very good. And we've kind of been harping on this slow-paced offense that he has going. I will say his average possession time since 2017 is around 235th in the nation. They really changed heavily in the 2022 to 2023 year. So not this last year, but the year before that, where they then went to the 350s, one of the slowest in the entire nation. But prior to that, they were hovering around 100, about 150 to 270 was kind of that range in the first 5 or so years. And then really, really slowed things down because I think that's what fits him the best for his Morehead State teams the last 2 years. An interesting thing about what we can expect out of a Preston Spradlin's coached Duke's team.
I left the playbook in Morehead. Like, it's about players, right? And it's about playing efficiently, and it's about learning your team, building trust, and putting those guys in the best positions to showcase their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. People will say, man, they run a lot of stuff. They run a lot of sets. We do, but that's not my stuff. It's stuff that we come up with and we put in to accommodate our players.
Kind of feels like our dream coach, like the two of us. He's talking about like efficiency. He was talking at one point, he talks about like the usage rate, right, of that 6'10" post player. They're talking about like he clearly looks at stats and numbers and is focused on like being very efficient on both ends, which is like for us Ken Pom dorks, sort of like a very exciting time. So I'm pretty excited for the way he runs a program.
I'm super excited. When he was talking about that, we adapt to the players. I was like, that's music to my ears, because there were so many times even under the Byington era,
Yeah.
like, he's a great coach. He does what he does, though. It is 3-pointers and play inside. He's a very analytics driven type of coach. But there were times where it was just like, the mid-range game is working. Stop driving into Justin Absent. Stop getting blocked. And it's just like, this is what we do. This is how we're going to do. And it sounds like Spradlin is very much of the mind of, if something's not working, I'm gonna talk with the team and lean into what they're thinking. If we have a fast-paced 3-and-D type of team, that's what we're going to run. If we have a slow team that, might not be the best offensively, we might grind you to a pulp and just lean on our great defense. We may see a vastly different team in terms of what Ken Pom says year in and year out. And I'm excited for that.
They also share it well offensively. Drew Thelwell, I think it is this year, who's also in the portal, averaged over 6 assists per game.
Portal.
He actually had 19 in a game. I think it was against Alice Lloyd, the NAIA team that Spradlin played at when he was a college student, but puts up some great numbers. They've had multiple guys in the past who are, well over 5 assists per game. Would not be shocked if JMU has a player on its roster that leaves the Sun Belt in assists next year. So they pass it. They play good defense. Kind of feels like the old people in the stands for JMU games, or like Valley residents who are like 70 plus are gonna be like really pleased with this.
That's how you play basketball right there.
Yeah, it's like follow your own shot, like all those kind of like cliches.
Share the rock, make the extra pass, make the extra pass. You got to pass it 5 times before you take a shot.
I just feel like they're going to make a lot of really smart plays, and considering he should be able to get better athletes at JMU than Morehead State, that seems exciting.
Let's change gears and talk a little bit about transfer portal and NIL. And before we do that, this was a great insight into how Preston Spradlin is going to handle this era of college athletics, specifically when it comes to NIL deals.
NIL wasn't really a part of what we do at Morehead State. And it's not necessarily going to be a part of how we recruit at JMU, just to be quite frank with you. I'm not going to get away from having people that want to be there for the right reasons. It's a part of the landscape now, but it's certainly not going to be the forefront of why we recruit. We're not going to get in bidding wars and all those things. I'll be honest with it. And via the portal the last 3-4 years, I have had 0 NIL conversations with a recruit. And I would give my staff tons of credit for that, because obviously they do the work ahead of time to fill players out and kind of see what they're looking for. And if, that's coming up in the first, conversation or two, that's just not on the right list of priorities for us, to be quite honest with you. I get it. It's part of the deal. I'm excited to embrace the resources and the ability to have some of those things at JMU, but it's not going to be the reason that we bring players, here to JMU. They're going to come for the right reasons. They're going to come because they want to be a part of the championship program. They want to be challenged. They want to grow, not just as players, but they want to grow as men off the court. And so that's where it's going to start for us, and that's how we're going to, approach the NIL and the landscape that it's in right now.
Seems fair for JMU's current situation, right?
Seems very fair, and it lines up almost in lockstep with what the Montpelier Collective has said that their goal is. It's not going out and paying players to come to JMU. It's a retention tool, and I think that's what Preston Spradlin kind of agrees with and is in lockstep with. And it's also evident in the players that Spradlin goes and gets in the transfer portal.
Yeah, he gets a lot of guys, right, who are under-recruited, maybe played at smaller schools. I mean, there's a possibility you could look at guys even who are playing D2 or something like that. He's not going to go out, I wouldn't think, and add a bunch of like Power 5 flameouts. So there's obviously a possibility he adds some of those kind of guys, but he's done a really good job of recruiting high school players and then transfers who aren't like well-known guys.
Yeah, the top 3 players for Morehead State this past year in terms of Ken Pom, their overall offensive rating and usage, was Riley Minix, who was an NAIA All-American during his time at Southeastern, used his last year of eligibility, his graduate year at Morehead State, turned into one of the best players in the OVC. Jordan Lathon, 2 years at Morehead State, started his career at UTEP, then to Milwaukee, and then used his senior and grad year at Morehead State. So it's kind of a guy that never really found a footing, never really found a true quote unquote home, found his way to Morehead State. Preston Spradlin got the most out of him. Drew Thelwell, their third most used player. You mentioned him earlier. He's in the transfer portal. He was a Morehead recruit and kind of a homegrown talent. So you see there a mix of a little bit of everything, an NAIA type of guy, a mid-major level player. UTEP had some success there, found his way to Milwaukee, couldn't really hold on there, and then finds his way to Morehead for whatever reason, three schools, but really catches on and spends his most time with Preston Spradlin, and then Drew Thelwell, a high school guy that he was able to recruit and develop into a top-end OVC player.
He seems to develop really well. You mentioned Lathon or whatever, UTEP, Milwaukee, and then Morehead State. He never had an offensive rating at any of those schools over 92, which he had his freshman year at UTEP. 109.8 at Morehead State. He was just way more efficient. Like everything he did,
he leans into his strengths. Like I think that's evident that Preston Spradlin leans into his players' strengths.
Yep, leans into the strengths, helps him get better over time. Just seems like kind of a perfect coach for what JMU is, because I know fans obviously think of JMU as like fringe P5 going up, doing all these great things. They can't compete in bidding wars. It's not just that like Spradlin maybe doesn't want to.
They can't.
They can't. Yeah.
I mean, they very well cannot. Going back to then 2022 to 2023, those top three players, Mark Freeman, Alex Gross, Jake Wolf. Mark Freeman became the OVC player of the year and was the preseason player of the year heading into this past season. Got injured 2 weeks before the season, but he was a Tennessee State to Illinois State player. Again, then found his way to Morehead State. First year with the program, is the OVC player of the year. Alex Gross, NAIA for 4 years, used his final year of eligibility with Morehead State. Then Jake Wolf was at Lipscomb for 3 years, used his final 2 years at Morehead State, and was the most effective he was. So it's really, really promising.
Yeah, just they seem to find ways to develop players in a really impressive way, and then find guys in the portal. If they can get them for more than a year, they develop well, but they play to their strengths and maximize 1 year, 2 years, whatever out of those players.
Yeah. So I want to take this into a kind of a quick little chat just to throw these ideas off of you, because this coaching search opened my eyes, I think, a lot more to the life of a mid-major than I think football did, because football went out and got arguably one of the hottest names on the market. Bob Chesney was in the running to be Syracuse's head coach. He's kind of always floated around Boston. Like that's a Power 5 type of coach. And JMU was able to go out, lure him to JMU for the opportunity to grow his coaching resume even more and continue to go out. So I think the life of a mid-major is a little different on the football side, because on the basketball side, I was sitting there and I was like, well, why can't we go out and get the best coach from, the Missouri Valley? Why can't we go and get the best coach from the SoCon? These are guys that, JMU's probably a slight pay increase. And then you kind of think about it and you're like, man, life as a mid-major when your coach gets poached sucks, because that hire is going to be so much more difficult than the football hire. You're trying to poach a coach from a one-bid league to a one-bid league for a minimal pay raise, maybe not minimal, but it's not the pay raise of Mark Byington going from $600,000 to assume a $3 million-ish a year. And you're asking a guy to leave a culture and a program that he has built to then do it all again at a James Madison program that hasn't had a lot of success in the last decade. And it just was really like, this is different.
I think that's really well said, right? Where football has kind of proven the last decade to be a great stepping stone. If you want a bigger opportunity, and maybe with even Cignetti showing Power 5 opportunities or Power 2, right? If you're talking Big Ten, SEC, Byington showed that, but it's just one example. I think if Spradlin's able to have success and take another job, it completely changes the landscape of who JMU could look at. And then also they kind of need to have a president and AD in place to, to really make a huge leap in candidates as well. But Spradlin, lower level, maybe flew under our radar a little bit. definitely seems like he fits the mold of a guy who could take a bigger job given his age and experience.
And he fits the mold that Jeff Bourne has gone after very hard ever since the terrible Lou Rowe fire.
Yeah, Jeff Bourne loves himself a proven head coach.
He said, "We're never again hiring it. I don't care what team it is for. That Lou Rowe experience has ruined it." But it just really was eye-opening that poaching from one bid mid-major league to another one bid mid-major league is really, really difficult. And good news over with our friends at App State. They signed Dusty Kearns to a 6-year extension, meaning he's gone at the end of next year. But really good to see that he'll at least be in the conference for another year, because I think if those two teams can battle at the top of the Sun Belt, it's going to be a really fun conference next year.
Yeah, Arkansas State, I think, is one that could make a huge
yeah.
leap. So there could be some better basketball, and maybe it elevates the league's image or reputation or whatever, which would be, I guess, beneficial for everybody.
Giving a rating to this hire, because Preston Spradlin, it was a name you had on your preliminary list. He didn't make the cut for whatever reason. For me, he wasn't even on my list. I didn't even look at him when we had like the top coaching candidates to target when we had that video up on our YouTube. But I think after everything, I give this an A higher.
I think it's a great hire. I think he's very calm. He seems like somebody who's willing to adapt. He seems similar to Byington in that way, where maybe even more willing to adapt. But Byington was never like too high or too low. He was always kind of like,
annoyingly.
Yeah, he's like, we're going with the process. We're sticking to what we're trying to do. We're going to get better. We're going to prepare ourselves for March. Feels like Spradlin's doing the same thing, but he comes to JMU with like way more success than Byington did. Byington had never made an NIT or NCAA tournament until this year. Spradlin's gone to 2 NCAA tournaments and an NIT. Like, he's proven he can take a mid-major to the big dance, which is what you're looking for. And I think they are like 1/16th Morehead State in KenPom right now, which sort of moves occasionally because you still have some teams playing. That'd be third in the Sun Belt this year. It's like you could have dropped his Morehead team into the Sun Belt, and they're definitely top half. And I think they're a step below App and JMU, but then right there is the third team, certainly competitive with Arkansas State, competitive with Troy. Like Louisiana could have made the Sun Belt title game, right? So it's, if you take that team, plop it in, they're already competitive. Now you imagine he'd be able to get slightly higher level of talent, more fans, I would assume, at games, right? More fan support, little NIL money to retain some guys. Seems like the ceiling would be pretty high.
Seems like the ceiling is the ceiling. What's the saying? The ceiling is the sky?
Ceiling is the roof.
Ceiling is the roof. That's what it is. Do you want to do the bouncing ball story here before we move to transfer portal talk?
Yeah, this was a fun one.
This was a great story about how bouncing a ball taught him a lot about being a coach.
That interim season that I had was really difficult. You know, we took over and a lot of difficult things happening. And so we were able to flip it and kind of turn the corner because I did not make that season about me and getting the job. I believe it was 4 or 5 games we won in a row. And then you start hearing the outside noise, right? You start hearing everybody say, well, they should just give Preston a job and, go ahead and rip off the interim tag and all these things. And I had done a good job of distracting that or blocking that out rather to get to that point. But then, human nature, seeks into all of us, especially when you're 29 years old and you open up your Twitter feed and you start to say, you know what, they're right. Maybe they should give me that job. And I'll never forget, I got humbled quickly. We played a game at Tennessee Tech, a game in which we probably should have won, and it came down to the wire. And I remember we needed to foul. We came out of a timeout, and we talked exactly about how Tech was going to run an out-of-bounds play to get it to the best free throw shooter. This is how we would strategize and take that away so that a poor free throw shooter would catch it. We executed it beautifully. And the guy who shoots about 50% caught the ball, and we looked at him, and we looked at him, and then we looked at him again. Then he throws it to a guy that shoots 90%, and we fouled him, right? And so then the ball rolls over to me. I remember I'm squatted down, and the ball comes to me, and I pick it up, and I go to slam it. And I really, truly, this is true, I meant to just kind of slam and hit it. I slammed it so hard it almost went to the top of the Hooper Eblen Center there at Tennessee Tech. And the ref just kind of looked at me, and he's like, man, I got to do it. So he teed me up. So we lose the game. It was a 1-point game. He teed me up, and it was at that point, the very first time I'd ever taken a game away from my players.
That's a fun story. And then he said after that he like apologized to all the seniors the next day, and they went on a little winning streak after that.
I love that story because it really spoke to my heart. Because as a kid, a college student who got teed up, who got a double tech once in an intramural game, I respect it. I respect a good old-fashioned ball slam to get a tech.